welcome to another episode of Every Now and Then. My name is Brian Smith, and today we are going to continue our epic saga of the JonBenét Ramsey case. I have entitled this entire series, We Have a Kidnapping. Today we're going to discuss the mistakes, the bungling really, of the Boulder Police Department. And I'm convinced that if they would have followed just basic police work and law enforcement policies, that the case would have been solved within a couple days. I'm not a law enforcement person, and I don't really want to be critical because we know that in certain situations that not everybody does their job. But this was a case where it seems like the killer of JonBenét got really, really lucky because the crime happened the day after Christmas, either late Christmas night or the day after Christmas in the early morning hours. There wasn't a lot of people on duty. This was Boulder, Colorado. They had actually no homicides, no kidnappings that entire year, maybe one or two for the decade. And those on duty who came to the house, and it's absolutely true, it was not the A team. It was the backup group who came, and they made a lot of errors. Those who were on call either just said, I'm not coming, or we'll get to it tomorrow, or they were unavailable. On vacations, taking cruises. So, not being a law enforcement expert by any means, what procedures are basically done when law enforcement responds to a kidnapping in a home? This was 1996, so I don't know if there was even an Amber Alert back then. If there was, why wasn't that initiated? As soon as the 9/11 operator was told by Patsy Ramsey, we have a kidnapping, you would have thought that she would have had a system in place to get things going, that they would call the FBI, and they would follow their policy. They didn't do that at all. It was like, okay, we'll send somebody over, and we'll go from there. Make sure it is a kidnapping. Well, obviously, if she's saying we have a kidnapping, at least take her for her word, even though I do believe that it was not ever going to be a kidnapping. But again, law enforcement responds in the home. They typically search the home. This was a small police force. Now they would have dogs going into that house. If they would have had a dog going into that house, they would have quickly discovered what was going on, quickly figured it out. That was not the case, and that's really a crying shame for the justice of JonBenét that they did not have that in place. Law enforcement will request permission to search the home thoroughly, which makes me wonder if John and Patsy would have given permission. So a thorough house search includes closets, attics, storage spaces. They'll look for the child any place they could be hiding, such as under beds, large boxes, things of that nature. Law enforcement will gather evidence. I want to go back to the thorough search. Obviously, that was not done. Officer French, uniformed policeman, pulled on the door, but it was stuck or didn't move out very well, so he just left it. I do not understand that. I'm sorry. I don't get that at all. And they just seem to miss a lot of areas. And then when there was a search, Linda Arndt asked, technically, the prime suspect to search the home. She said from top to bottom, and he went for the bottom, up, directly to the area. That's John, the father of JonBenét. So it's almost like you've got the foxes guarding the hen house, so to speak. Then the next thing that the law enforcement will do, they'll gather the evidence. They will assess the parents' intentions. They also consider reporting the parent as a suspect. That really wasn't done. They were not considered suspects that first day. So this got off to a really, really terrible start. It's holiday, the B team's coming, other members of the team are not there to happen. So you separate the parents. That was not done. And you get information to see if the stories match. That was not done. The other thing that you must do, this is not even in the guide here, 101 police work, is you get all the people out of the house who are cleaning up tables and trampling on the carpet and stepping on possible debris that could be used. Get them out of the house and yellow tape around the house and go from there. That was not done. They all stayed there, eating sandwiches, wiping counters, moving things. Disgraceful. Even I know that you have to do that. The next thing that they must do is enter the child's name in the National Crime Information Center. There may not have been one in '96. I already mentioned that you would consider using an Amber Alert. I don't know when that came into play, but of course that would have been done. Even if it wasn't in play back then, 9/11 operator and the people there could have easily got it over the airwaves, called the radio station, the newspaper would get that out there right away. And of course, law enforcement would then pursue criminal charges under state law and federal law and go from there. Check with the neighbors immediately, put up an area of blockage, so if there is a person of interest, they would be blocked at roadblocks, and none of that was done. So it was just one mistake after another. Of course, one mistake doesn't derail the case, but when it's one after another, those drops of water turn into a pool, and the next thing you know, we've got a river of evidence going out of the door. Again, they arrived in a squad car. They did not call in the A-team, didn't check out the door, the wine cellar right away, didn't call the FBI, and basically at the end, Linda Arndt was left by herself. Whether you can say, well, we can criticize her, she should never have been left alone in that house. That is just terrible. There was a lot of assuming. They assumed that the potential kidnapper was gone, that it was a kidnapping. They just took the word for it of the ransom letter. Everything was just assuming, and those sort of things. I think the biggest mistake, if I had to pick one, would be that they did not separate the parents, get them on recordings about what had happened. Didn't record anything right away like they would now. The bar that was set for how to do it properly was the Christopher Watts work. Of course, that's much later, 20 plus years later, where they had body cameras and interviewed him and had the FBI write in. By the next day, the Ramseys had lawyered up and they were not going to go through the FBI. They really should not have been given that choice to do that. And you go from there and you separate. So that's what makes it very, very frustrating on this case. All the constant mistakes that are just basic that even a novice knows that you must do in this case. It's almost like they just didn't take it seriously. But 20 years after the chief police at that time, Mark Beckner, gave a very long interview. He did talk about the early mistakes made by the Boulder Police at that time. At that time was not the chief of police. Now, he said that because the crime happened on Christmas Day, there was fewer people available to get to the scene. He also said that one key mistake was not getting full statements from the parents on the day of the crime. He said that the girl's parents seemed to show unusual behavior, but that could have been due to a number of reasons, he said. And that also that the mistakes cited by Beckner have been addressed in subsequent years, but that doesn't help the case. In fact, the public information officer, Kim Cobell, said that those problems were acknowledged early in the investigation. Over the years, we addressed those later in the investigation, but that does no good to close the barn door, after the horse has gotten out. Now, Beckner did say that the police immediately thought that a 2.5-page ransom letter was very, very odd. That raised a red flag right off the bat, pointing toward the parents as the prime suspects. And if I can add to that, I really don't think that a foreign faction would decide that they're going to have their headquarters in Boulder, Colorado, and to demand a very small amount of money, $118,000, and assume that the Ramseys, even though they're wealthy, would have in a bank account that amount of money in the bank. So that was also very, very strange. So many assumptions on this case by the police. I also must add that Burke was never interviewed. He was never talked to until weeks later. Again, there was the assumption that he had no part in this case at all. They just got him away, separated him as quickly as they could, and didn't separate him from his parents. He had time to be coached. He was just a few weeks from being 10, and not to mention that the body was allowed to be moved at least twice, from the basement to floor, and then from the floor to a sofa. A blanket was put on her that could have added fibers from that blanket to JonBenét. It just opens up a Pandora's box when that is done. So that is just some of the bungling that was done, and things that should have been done were not done, and things were done that should not have been done. That's just police work 101 for the most part. And I don't know if the Border Police to this day has ever been able to overcome all of those innuendos and mockery and documentaries that have talked about the bungling of the case and ruined probably a lot of careers that will be there forever. So what do you think? Am I on the money on that? What do you think? This has been We Have a Kidnapping, the continuing saga of the JonBenét Ramsey case. My name is Brian Smith, and thank you for listening.